Hey everyone, in this video we are going to go through an introduction to genes. So we're going to talk about genes, chromosomes, and DNA. We're going to start out by looking at a visual. And in this very first part, I'm actually just going to let her talk through it.
Here is a cell, the basic unit of all living tissue. In most human cells, there is a structure called a nucleus. The nucleus contains the genome. In humans, the genome is split between 23 pairs of chromosomes. Each chromosome contains a long strand of DNA, tightly packaged around proteins called histones. Within the DNA are sections called genes. These genes contain the instructions for making proteins.
Okay, we're going to come back to this video again, but let's summarize what we just looked at. So we are starting with the cell and we're zooming all the way into a gene. So we start with the cell, and remember from when we looked at our mitosis lab, we saw those darker blue circles and we said those were the nuclei, which is the plural of nucleus. Those are all the nuclei of the cells, and that's where all the genetic information is contained. So we start looking at a cell, we zoom in to look at the nucleus, and I'm now telling you that inside the nucleus we have all of the genetic information of the cell, which consists of 46 chromosomes, or what we would call 23 pairs of chromosomes, because 23 times 2 gives us 46 total, but they're in pairs because you get one from the male parent and one from the female parent. So we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. That whole set is called our genome. So within the nucleus, we have the genome, which is all of the chromosomes. We can then zoom in more to look at just one chromosome. And we remember the chromosome is just condensed DNA. So then if we zoom into one section of that DNA, we'll see a gene. So we're zooming in from the cell, zooming to the nucleus, zooming to the chromosome, zooming even more to just one gene, which codes for a protein. I don't know why that faded like that. Each chromosome contains genes which have specific with specific function that results in our traits. So we're coming back to the visual now, and I'm going to play it again. So we start out just looking at the whole cell. We're zooming into the nucleus. Zooming in, we see the whole genome, and then we zoom into one chromosome. Unwind that to look at all the DNA, and then it's highlighting one gene inside that DNA, which is like a chunk of the DNA, which codes for one set of proteins or one protein. So we can use kind of an analogy to think about this zooming in idea. So if we start on the right, we can think of a gene like a chapter in a book. That is as zoomed in as we're going to get. It doesn't tell us all of the information we need. It just tells us everything we need about one element. So it's like one chapter. We're just learning about maybe our hair color because it's a gene for hair color, or we're learning about eye color because it's a gene for eye color, or something like that. If a gene is a chapter, then our chromosome could be like our book as one part of a larger series. Then our whole genome, which is all of the chromosomes, all of the genetic information, would be like the set of books. So a set of set of books in a series. So like the full Harry Potter series, if the chromosome is just the first Harry Potter book, something like that. And then the nucleus is like a bookshelf that holds that series, since it's just housing them. And then finally, that all happens within our cell. So that would be like our library. So we have like our library as our cell, zooming into our bookshelf that holds all our Harry Potter books. Then our set of chromosomes is that series of books. One chromosome would be one book, and one gene would be like one chapter. So we're just zooming in more and more. I already showed the video again. So like I said, a gene is a section of the DNA that provides instructions for making a specific protein. You may also hear me say, or hear in some videos, that the gene codes for a specific trait, which is true. A trait is like a physical characteristic like eye color or hair color. But the way that it codes for this is by coding for a protein. So by giving the instructions for a protein, which then has the structures and functions to make our traits. So a gene codes for a protein, which define our traits. There are two types of models you may see when we're talking about genes. So the first one is that, like the first one we saw, where we see this kind of unwound DNA strand that we're looking at, and we highlight a piece of it to say, this is the piece we're looking at, this gene. The other way you may see it is if you take a chromosome and you kind of just show it as two like almost linear pieces. That's where you see kind of the X. This is if you just kind of straighten them out. So this is looking at the two chromosomes in the chromosome pair, and then each of those bands of color would be a gene. And you can notice the blue and the brown section there. Those would be, maybe, for example, having a gene for blue eyes from mom and a gene for brown eyes from dad. And then we're not going to get into in this unit what determines which one wins, but we will later. So those are just two different ways to illustrate what a gene looks like, because these are just models. So those are two ways to think about what it looks like. And then we can think about the whole set of genes, or sorry, the whole set of chromosomes, which remember we said is our genome. So we can look at those in this thing that we call a gene map or a chromosome map, where we can see the full set of chromosomes that a person would have. So here's what that would look like in real life. Again, humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes for 46 total chromosomes. And remember, each chromosome is like one book. And then the whole set of chromosomes that we can see in this image would be the full book series, where we get the whole story, all the genetic information. Okay, so summarizing that, the genome of a human consists of 23 chromosome pairs, which can be found in the nucleus of every cell. The exception to that is sperm cells and egg cells don't have the pair. They just have 23 individual chromosomes. Every other cell in the body has 23 chromosome pairs. A chromosome is made of condensed DNA. The genes are found on the chromosomes, and the genes code for a particular protein or a set of proteins, which has functions that appear as traits. And then traits are physical characteristics of the organism. So that's kind of a summary of all of the pieces we just talked about. And then the last piece to think about here and to reason with is the idea that we have all of these genes, but then there are things that can allow them to be turned on or turned off, like a light switch. So if a gene is turned on, then the protein that it codes for will be made. So if gene A codes for protein A and that gene is turned on, then gene A will make protein A and protein A will be formed. If gene B, the second section of the DNA, codes for protein B, but it's turned off, then that section of the DNA is not read and that protein is not made. And then we have a third one here. So the third section of the DNA codes for gene C. That one is turned on, so the protein is made. So if it's turned off, we don't get the protein. Here are some examples kind of summarizing all of that, wrapping it up together. So let's say the thing we observe as scientists is that Sally has blue eyes and her sister Sam has brown eyes. So here are the real genes that are involved here. In humans, on chromosome 15, remember there are 23 pairs, 46 chromosomes, they're all numbered. So on chromosome 15, there's a gene called OCA2. This kind of structure where you see a few capital letters and numbers, that's usually what a gene name will look like, just kind of that sort of abbreviation. So, sorry, in humans, chromosome 15 contains a gene called OCA2. OCA2 codes for a protein called P protein. So we've got a gene, it codes for a protein. So far, so good. P protein is involved in the production of cellular structures that make and store melanin. So that's how the protein turns into a trait. Melanin is just pigment. It's the same thing that gives us pigment in our skin. So in people with brown eyes, the OCA2 gene is usually turned on, meaning they make more of that protein, and therefore they have more melanin in their eyes. In people with blue eyes, that gene is usually turned off, So they don't make as much of that protein, and therefore they have less melanin. So it's just an issue of we have a gene, both people have a gene. For one person, it's turned on. When it's turned on, it makes this protein, which makes melanin. When it's turned off, it doesn't make that protein, so it doesn't make melanin. So the eyes are lighter. So in this case, Sally, who has blue eyes, has the gene turned off more of the time. And Sam, who has dark brown eyes, has it turned on more of the time. Here's another example. I love cilantro, and my sister thinks it tastes like soap, and it makes her feel sick. So this is another example with another real gene. So humans have a gene called OR6A2, and it's on chromosome 11. When this gene is turned on, it codes for proteins which act as a specific receptor in the nose. So this is the trait, right? The receptor. These receptor proteins can bind to molecules in the vapor given off by cilantro, so when we smell it. Therefore, people who have that gene turned on have a receptor in their nose that allows them to smell something that people without that receptor can't smell. So people who have the gene turned on can smell this molecule, and it turns out it smells like soap. And those people usually hate cilantro. People who have this gene turned off, they do not get that receptor in their nose, and so they can't smell that soapy molecule. So they don't have the gene on, so they don't code for, it does not code for the receptor protein, so they don't get the receptor protein because it's turned off, and therefore they cannot smell the soapy smell. So they're like, yeah, it's delicious, it does not smell like soap. So in my situation, I probably have my gene turned off because I'm not making that receptor, I'm not making the protein, so it's probably turned off. And my sister probably has it turned on because she hates cilantro and thinks it tastes like soap. So she's probably got that receptor protein. So that gene was turned on, so it made that protein, leading to that trait. Quick important note is that turning genes on and off is not the only cause for genetic differences, but it is an important one. There may be situations where a person just doesn't have the same gene, or things that will lead to the actual structure of the gene changing. For right now, we're just thinking about genes turning on and off, though. And then if you are still feeling confused, you can click on the slides here and go to this video. It goes through some of the same stuff that we talked about in this one. All right, that's all I have for you. Take care, guys.